You know why they call it Dex, don't you? It's because they forgot to copyright the name Yellow Pages. Isn't that great? All right. Okay, it's been a little while, so we'll just... Two phone books for the price of one.
That's impossible.
It is.
How do you do that?
Muscles, its own muscles.
Today, January 7th, 2009, I'm talking with Sam Kent, a resident of Boulder since 1957, magician, DJ, and so much more.
All retired, by the way. Born in Chicago, July 1946. That would be making me a baby boomer, I guess. Mm-hmm. And lived there, Chicago, in Oak Park, Illinois, home of Ernest Hemingway and Frank Lloyd Wright, until I was 11, and then we moved here to Boulder.
Did you think it was pretty cool to live so close to the drive-in?
Oh yeah. We could go to my brother's room and look around the corner of his window and actually see the screen. And we always had this plan that we would run a wire all the way to one of the speakers, about 500 yards away, so we could hear and not just watch the movie. But we never did that. I remember going in the Volkswagen that I had to drive, and I was one of the few guys who would actually go to the drive-in theater to see the movie. And I'm proud of that. Maybe. So yeah, Uni Hill, then I went to Baseline, which was fairly new at that time. That was, the cool kids went to Baseline and the hoods went to Casey. You could tell because they wore darker clothes. But they had better looking girls, so it was a wash, So my first little scooter was a Vespa, and then I got a Ducati, which was pretty cool. And I had that for a year or two until I turned 16, and then my mother went ballistic and gave me a car because she didn't want me on a motorcycle. And I remember I did wear sport coats. Not too many kids in junior high wore sport coats, but I did on my little motor scooter. Didn't have a helmet, of course. Amazing that we survived. But I had that until I was 16. And then I drove our little 59 Volkswagen Bug, and on the side of it was a little logo about this big that said Kent's Kettle. And that was the name of our little restaurant, coffee shop. My folks up in the hill on College had a coffee shop. They left the house at 5:30 in the morning and worked till about 4 or 5 in the afternoon. Whew. Yeah, and I worked there. I was 12, and I worked there. I'd go in and take a couple of orders, and then I would sit down and eat breakfast. It was hard. They paid me 60 cents an hour. I remember I would just eat a huge amount of food. I mean, I'd have an omelet with potatoes and toast, and then I'd have milkshake, for dessert, and then maybe I'd have some tea or some more milk and maybe some more food. Donuts. My dad made great donuts.
Kent's Kettle lasted about 3 years.
About 3 years, and then they sold it to a fellow named Lou, and he sold it to another Greek, we're Greek, named Chris, and it was Chris's Kettle for quite a long time. They got with some folks who wanted to open a bowling alley in Boulder, and they wanted my dad to be a part investor and to run the restaurant. These three folks built what was known as Thunderbird bowling lanes. Actually, they let me start to cook there. Nobody died, so that was good. And it was fun having a bowling alley, We'd go in and bowl for free, and I had an average of well over 100. By then I was about 15, 16. This is my father, Dan Kent, and he just finished bowling the first perfect game in Boulder's history, perfect 300. Every time after about the 5th or 6th strike, the rest of the bowling alley started getting quiet. And by the 10th frame, completely quiet. Everybody came over and watched him, and he was left-handed, and every one of his balls was just perfect except one. One crossed over to the other side, and everybody went, oh, and then it was a strike. So it was very cool. So I did comedy. I guess that's a matter of opinion. But what happened was there was a performer, a comedian named Shelley Berman, and he was a very big influence on my life, along with Jonathan Winters, as far as comedians go. And I just heard one of his routines so many times I had it memorized. So I put on a suit like he wore, got a stool, I was in the 8th grade, and sat on it and I stole one of his routines. I did pretty well. Stage fright was never really an issue for me, except when I didn't memorize my lines. I did plays for a while, and I was terrible because I never memorized my lines. So I spent all of my energy on stage trying to remember my lines instead of actually being the character. So I stopped doing that when I started performing other things, you know, and other things besides acting, producing, directing, mostly magic shows. Yeah, magic shows were great because I didn't have to memorize any lines. It was very nice. Yeah, we went to movies Friday and Saturday night. Now I never had a girlfriend in high school, but so I'd go to movies, Friday night movies at the Boulder Theater, and see like double feature Vincent Price movies, and that was great fun. We had guys in high school who had some pretty cool cars, and they would drag the cars. I don't even remember where, I guess 28th Street, maybe Pearl Street, yeah. And that was fun. I didn't do that because I didn't have, I had a Volkswagen Bug, In high school, my senior year, they needed a drummer for the pep band, and because I wasn't in the marching band, normally they wouldn't let you do that, but they needed a drummer. So I brought not just my little snare drum, but my entire set of Ludwig drums to the football games and the basketball games and played. And then somebody else who had the right to be in the band wanted to do that. And I was very upset. But he brought his entire set of drums, so it was like, the Who or the Rolling Stones. We had 2 sets of drums playing with the pep band. It was great. So here I was, my last semester. I could take whatever I wanted. So I took Chinese literature and, I don't know, a home ec or something like that. And I went to him and I said, Jim, I need 3 more hours. Can I take an independent study with you? And he said, sure, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't know. He said, how about Charlie Chaplin? I said, that sounds good. So every Wednesday for that semester, they would send over a projector, 16 millimeter projector, and Chaplin films, what they had, which was about 20, I would say, of his shorts, and then 4 or 5 of his features. And chronologically, I watched all the Chaplin. At the end of the semester, he said, so what did you learn? I said, Chaplin was great. He said, you get an A. And the funny thing is, I learned more from that class than I did from almost any other class at CU. And this was in '74, and opened the Wizard Magic Shop. And so I had my shop there for 5 years. And during that time, the mall was created. So I was the first performer on the mall. The day we officially opened, it was in July of '76, somebody said, why don't you do some magic tricks? So I went out on the 1100 block by my store and did something, I don't know. And once again, I just threw things out there, and they thought it was a show. But it felt exciting to be there, and I'm glad I was part of it. One of my employees, Lamont Ream, was an escape artist. And I said, Lamont, why don't you do something? So we hired a crane. Actually, they came and did it for free. And we hoisted him up 50 feet in the air by his ankles while he was wearing a straitjacket. It was right in front of the store. And there were, I don't know how many people, I'll say 1,000 people. I actually had to close off Pearl Street and part of Broadway for a while, because everybody came to watch this guy. And it was very exciting to watch him do this legitimate escape in front of all these people. My friend Brent Warren and I put together an act called Dr. Chuckle and Mr. Hype. And he built all this incredible equipment, and things, boxes and cages and all kinds of stuff. And I did little tricks with cards. I don't like to carry around heavy material, but we worked for one summer. It was fun. It was real fun, but it was a lot of work for him, and so we didn't do it again. When I had my shop, I used to sell something called flash paper, which is just very thin paper, chemically treated, that if you touched it to a match, it went poof. It's great stuff, especially if you're 12. And actually any age, it's great stuff. Well, somebody saw some of this stuff at some concert and said, where did you get it? And I said, oh, the Wizard. So the fire department came and told me I had to stop selling this stuff because it was a fire hazard. And every magic shop in the world sells flash paper. So I went to Janet Roberts, who was on the city council then, and I knew her a little bit, and I said, what can we do about this? And she said, well, come to the council and do a demo or something. So I went to the council and I brought this flash paper and, you put it in your hand and wad it up and like that, and, just doesn't burn you. Well, I told them it doesn't burn you. The fact is, it did burn me, but nothing serious. And they were very incredulous, but they passed a special ordinance that in Boulder you can now sell flash paper. And that was one of my great contributions to the city of Boulder, I believe. I was the first DJ on that station, 6 a.m., KBVL. The very first day, I was 15 minutes late to work. It is amazing. But then on the other hand, they only paid me $2.50 an hour, so it was all right, And if you stand in that exit door, facing the other exit door across the theater, there is this amazing echo chamber. So if you do, like that, it will. I love it. But I'm not one of those people who just longs for the old days. I mean, the only thing I would long for is, to be 11 again.